Oh, tēnā tātou katoa. I was going to do a short mihi, but it's such an intimate audience, I think we should just jump into it. So I'm Morgan Godfery. I'm going to be chairing this panel today with Leanne Tamaki and Michael Stevens. Today we're here to talk about Tangata Whenua, which I believe one of you can win this afternoon.
Really good odds.
This morning. And yeah, it's a landmark book, and I'm really glad that there are some people here to sort of discuss it, because it really does cover the sweep of Māori history from ancient beginnings in the South China Sea all the way to the struggle for Treaty of Waitangi rights. And I think it's a story a lot of New Zealanders don't know, or a lot of New Zealanders think only began in 1840. So I think it would be good if we could perhaps dive into those misconceptions and assumptions and talk about Leanne and Michael's role in the book. So now what I'm going to do is pass over to Leanne, who volunteered to introduce herself. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, good morning. My name's Leanne Tamaki, and I have tribal affiliations to Tūhoe and Ngāti Maniapoto, and I just want to say kia ora to our very beautiful audience and to the festival for inviting us to talk about this today, and also just a little mihi to some of the to the locals, Michael, Huirapa, Ngaitahu, Mamoi, Waitaha, peoples of this land, and also just I'm just mindful there are a couple of people who've passed away, and within Māori, communities, we need to acknowledge those passing. So Māori Ora Kingi, leader in Te Arawa, passed away yesterday, and in my own tribe, Kuia Te Uruhina Magavi, who's actually in the book, passed away as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge their passing. Kia ora.
Kia ora. And Michael, do you want to introduce yourself, or I can?
Okay, I'm Michael Stevens, so I'm a lecturer in Māori history here at the University of Otago in the Department of History and Art History. A bit of a local yokel. Ngai Tahu, grew up in Bluff. Don't know what else to say. I'm just back from the Mutton Island, so I'm still trying to, reintegrate myself in civilization.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start too, is with Ngāi Tahu. Atholl Anderson, one of the primary authors, is also Ngāi Tahu as well, and you're a local too. Was it by accident or design that Ngāi Tahu have dominated Tangata Whenua? How did you get involved?
How do I get involved? I guess partly it's to do, two reasons. One, it's partly to do with the low number of Māori historians, rather than anything special that I have. I think it was thin numbers on the ground. And the fact that Te Reo Ngāi Tahu contributed, I think, about $30,000 to the project. So maybe a mixture of those two things got me a seat at the table, for which I'm very grateful. Atholl, I think it was great because he's a quiet achiever, and he's very quiet, and his achievements are many. And so I think it's been a great project to kind of bring him out into the light a bit more, and a bit more due recognition for his work. So,
was there an opportunity for you two to work very closely together? Did he become a mentor during the process?
No, not at all. We probably didn't really know each other very well until quite recently, and it's through our shared membership of a standing committee of Te Reo that we sort of got to know each other better. And I obviously knew his work, and I do recall him visiting Bluff at points when I was just a snotty-nosed little kid running around. So there's no master-apprentice relationship there, but I do have a tremendous amount of respect for him.
Leanne, how did you get involved in the project? Were you approached, or was there some sort of application process?
Well, I've come from an image research background, so I worked on Te Ara a million years ago. I did an image research for the iwi entries and some of the science entries. And so, when you're doing that kind of work, you tend to associate with librarians. And librarians sent out a note of interest to me because I'd left Te Ara and I was studying at Auckland. And she sent an email and said, look, there's this publisher looking for an image researcher and we think you might be it. So that's how I got involved, and I contacted Bridget, and then from there came in, met with Aroha, and I've had quite a close relationship with Aroha, so I never knew her before other than the book she wrote, Hikoi. Even though we'd been at the same universities, just at different times. So she was at Auckland, but I'd never met her during my time there. And then from there, Aroha's got a really natural way of mentoring. She basically, if she's on a project and she knows you might be able to help or you might be interested in it, she just naturally brings you in. So for me, it was just an easy run, really. She's just like, well, I need some primary research done on the 20th century, because that was quite a huge gap that she was aware of, and she had to write that. There were no secondary resources, sorry, not primary resources, there were no secondary resources that she could really go to. So I did a stint at Archives New Zealand pulling that stuff out, and I have to say it was a bit trippy, kind of sitting at the table with her and Judith Binney, because I grew up reading Judith Binney, so a bit like Mike with Atholl. And because I'm tūhoe, Judith's written a whole heap of stuff about, Ruaki and Nana and encircled lands, so it was a little bit trippy sitting at the table with both of them. I'm just this little image researcher who was midway. I just finished honours year or something, so yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, were there any particular images that really stuck with you and that you still think about now? Because you must have gone through tens of thousands of images, with only about 500 making the book.
Yeah, 12,000 actually. They're still in boxes in Wellington, in Bridget's office. It's crazy because I guess it's like, I don't know, when you... it's funny because, I look at that book and I think, I've seen that image before. And then I showed some of my family and I'm like, wow, I've never seen this before. So it's one of those things where I guess when you work in it, it's hard to appreciate the uniqueness or the freshness of it. But there's little quirky things like talking to, like not in terms of images, but talking to Judith Binney about getting research tips about where to find stuff on my great-great-grandfather. Those are the things I remember, and even just the way, watching the way Aroha mentors and taking that into my own experience. Because I've been involved with other academics who don't do that naturally. Yeah. So I guess it's that type of stuff. I've got little quirky things, like there's this image in the book of a wedding in Taupo, and it's a double wedding, two brothers marrying two women, of course. And because that one comes to me because it just looks really like quite an interesting slice of life. Like there's a whare, they're eating on the atia at the front, food laid out on the ground, wooden planks. It's kind of a boring historical image, but I quite like it.
I think Aroha said that was one of her favourite images in the book. Yeah.
Great minds.
And it's a great image, right? It's like 1920s kind of style clothes. Like it's just...
It's the clothing, it's all of it. She's handing out cake. And, I guess I know that in the north they do that. They hand out the cake, but we don't do that.
They sing first.
Yes,
they have to sing for
you have to sing for the cake, but we don't do that in Tūhoe. So, just little tikanga things that are interesting to me. But, historical quirks, really not.
Yeah. Speaking of tikanga, Michael, you were working with a lot of private collections. How did you navigate that with the whānau, and how did you sort of keep faith with the confidence they had in you to navigate those collections?
Lubricated the wheels with titi fat, basically. And actually, that's it's a license to pretty much do anything. It's partly that, and partly, I guess there was a degree of selection on my part. I'm talking to people who I know who have big collections, but who are also kind of open and enthused by something like that. So I guess there was probably a few cranks I avoided, even though they had really interesting stuff. Because the thing is, I was doing my PhD at the time, so it's sort of bangs for bucks as well. What was the question? How did it?
Yeah, well, that probably covers
That
it.
probably covers it, right.
I've thought of another one.
Right,
How do you navigate working on such a large project like this while doing your PhD, while having whānau commitments, iwi commitments, and everything else happening in your life? How does it
Whānau
work?
commitments in every sense. We now got 3 children. When I started as a researcher, we were pregnant with our first, and he'll be 6 this Friday. So I guess that speaks to the size, the length of the campaign, which Leanne probably talk more about. But that's what I was going to say before. You said about the kind of the tikanga of managing it, and there was, because of the sensitivity, some particular photos, right? Of what, and so I did this little thing I wrote on birding, which maybe we'll talk about later. But there was a particular photo there with our family still packs tiki into kelp bags and into flax baskets and do what people did before they had plastic buckets basically. And so once the bark goes in around the kelp, and we lace it up, what we call tar, tar these things. And we always do that on a chair. And at night time you're sitting on those chairs to pluck the birds, and in the daytime you're sitting. And Bridget came and she said, "Oh, I just noticed it's food sitting on a chair." And there was this, what do we have to do? And I was like, print it. But my actual reply was I sent her an extract from what had just come out, Bill Black's biography. So Bill Black's a pioneer helicopter pilot from Southland, and he flew mutton birders to and from the islands for 30 plus consecutive seasons. He had to sort of forced to retire in the early 2000s, and they found he had a sort of a heart condition of some sort. So these take up microflight flying, so now just does that all around because that's not regulated. So, but however, so an incredible guy. I mean, he's like on Ruapuke Island, stories of him swinging a coal range into a front door and plonking it down in the kitchen where it had to go, and he's that guy. And so there's a story in this, he talked about, he had this section on mutton birding, and he's talking about the most remote, the most southern, biggest island, where it must have been in late 80s, early 90s, this old fella dropped dead. And so I thought, okay, I better take a cop down to make sure that there's no funny business or anything. So I did all that, and they had this old power wrapped in a blanket, and they said, "Oh, here's the body bag." And I said, "No, we're not putting him in a bag." And they said, "Okay." So they shoved him in the helicopter. And they said, "Oh, no, not just him, we want to send the kids back." And I'm like, okay. "Oh, we better send an adult with the kids." "Okay." "Oh, well, if she's going, I'm going." "Okay." "Oh, well, we better take some birds with us." So in the end, they had this helicopter, they had a row of buckets in the back, which the kids sat on, and then another row which they laid the dead body on, and then they had bags of fresh birds, which are non-salted ones. They shoved them in around it, right? And he's saying, "Oh, okay." They hopped in. They flew to Invercargill Airport, where they had a hearse arranged on, to the side, and the hearse pulled up, and this old fella saw it, and so he could suck them in the back of the hearse, put all the buckets of birds in the back of the hearse, put the fresh birds in. The grandkids climbed in. The others hopped in the front, and they said, as they're leaving, the hearse driver sort of looked, "Oh, okay," and the phrase that Bill said was, the hearse driver, look in his face, was, "I wonder what the hell he'd struck." And I've just used that story recently in an article in New Zealand Journal of History, and saying, well, most Māori would wonder what the hell it struck as well, the contagion of tapu, and then, So, as I said to Bridget, was like, this happens. Don't worry about the cheer, this happens, So, yeah.
Did you find stories like that, and did you have any personal experience of trying to navigate those rules or guidelines of tapu and tikanga?
Not really the tapu. Well, there's some basic stuff like with the cover, and it's probably more down to Bridget rather than us. I know Bridget was pretty fastidious with permissions and usage, beyond legal ramifications. So moral rights were incredibly important to her, and she was pretty. She wanted to make sure everybody was okay, because it speaks to the mandate of the book and the authority of it. I'm glad I didn't get that job. Joe Scully in the office back at BWB got that job, and she's amazing. She's like the brain that keeps, she's the other Bridget, making sure everything's ticking over and knowing where everything is. But I guess in terms of sensitivities, maybe what comes to mind is probably an image for the 20th century, which was a representation of gangs. And so, gangs are, for me anyway, incredibly complex, because they represent aspects of our society that, we might not, that are affronting, that highlight, societal issues that sometimes we can't comprehend. But also those people and those gangs are part of our families, they're part of our hapu iwi. So how do you represent all of that complexity? And when I say complexity, I'm thinking, colonisation, societal issues, dispossessed people in an image without shedding light on the modern context of that. So that was that's the more recent thing that I can think of, because I remember it at the beginning, and then I remember it near the end of the process. It came back again, why don't we have an image of gangs? And I remember saying to Bridget, well, if you had a history of, Italian people, would you necessarily have something about the mafia in there? There's such a breadth of what we are as Māori people, and gangs are, for some people, a significant part of that, but for some people, quite a small aspect of our history. And also, I remember Michael King's book, I can't remember the title though, The Illustrated History, when I was a kid looking at it, and going back to tangi and dead bodies, and just seeing the images of tangi and bodies lying in state, and being incredibly uncomfortable as a kid looking at that, but not understanding why until I got a bit older. And I guess I didn't want to elicit a reaction with an image in Tangata Whenua that I had as a kid looking at that. So for me, gangs is, it needs just much more compassion and research. And we might not have been able to do that justice in Tangata Whenua. So I guess that's one thing that comes to mind, yeah.
Was it always a collective decision too, when you were looking at these images and finding these stories about what was going to be included?
It was collective, but also, sometimes I might have found the image and found a bit of info, but I might not have had the final say, or I might have come in later and just reminded, because it's 8 years. Was it 8 years? This book, I think, from woe to go, and sometimes we forget why we didn't have it in the first place, or the notes got lost, or someone just feels quite strongly that they want it in, but absolutely collaborative. But also because it's the authors, so Judith unfortunately passed away during the writing of this as well, but Atholl and Aroha definitely, I would say, had more say over the image. But they were always open to robust conversation.
Yeah. Michael, when you were researching and writing your double-page spread, was the research process always leading you in different directions, or were you keeping faith with your brief? How did you keep to that brief rather than follow everything you find in the research process? Yeah,
I was quite lucky in two ways. One, not completely a one-trick pony, but birding is something I really know. So in that sense, it was just chucking something together. Like I think I did it on a Friday night after tea, and the kids were, it was that kind of. Although I should admit, Bridget first approached me, I think in probably September 2012, and I didn't actually sit down to write the thing until about March 2014. Maybe May 2014. So it was pretty, which is partly that it was starting an academic career. You're just sort of fighting fires, and if you can put something off, you put it off, because there's other. But the other thing was, because mine was possibly the last double-page spread to be written, I was privy to some of the proofs of the early ones. So the one on Heitiki, Whenua Hou, the Waido Bar, they were, I think all three of those Atholl wrote. And so he had allowed Bridget for me to see them. So I had a kind of sense of, how they hung together and how the images and text spoke to one another. And so I kind of went on. I wasn't working blind, I guess what I'm saying. And that made the job much easier for me, and I guess for Joe and others to sort of edit.
Leanne, have you followed up anything you've discovered while you were researching, and have you created a new project out of it, or are you following up leads that you found?
Not necessarily research-wise, but I think because of the nature of the project and the breadth of the range of the team, because we had established senior academics like Atholl and Judith, and then what Aroha terms middling academics herself. She puts there Mike,
I'm more muddling.
Melissa Matutina Williams, and then what Aroha has termed the emerging researchers, which is us. So I guess this book is really testament to building capacity within Māori historical research, and collegiality and community, because I know I've met a few people and we still, we're not necessarily collaborating, but we just gives you a bit more warmth and just knowing people are out there, just community, because we're all so spread apart. And I was saying to Mike, do we get into history for the money? No, because there's no money in it. So it's just, a way to keep yourself going, I guess. But in terms of research, no, I haven't. But then, I haven't actually read the whole book yet. I've read iterations of drafts, and I'm not really a reader of text as such, which is why I really love this book. When I was, I was really lucky that Bridget often would ask me to come back in, because I dipped in and out of the project over the 8 years, finished my master's, got a job, in between times would come back and just, dip in and do a bit of research, and I was lucky to come back at the end. And all through, because I'm not really text keen, I was always very aware of the way the book read through images. So Bridget was always really kind about accepting that advice from me. Who am I? I like images. So that was encouraging.
I was going to say, I think there's a book recently published, Māori history book, highly illustrated, and the text and the images in that book don't hang together nearly as well as this one does. I think it's a real virtue of this book. It's, the pictures weren't decorations put in at the end when the real work had been done. I think there is a sense of which each is shaping the other, and as I say, it's one of the strengths. And I can see how that would have happened.
Yeah, and we were really lucky with our team too that we. I don't know how Bridget. I definitely know it was at Aroha's. It was Aroha's leadership in terms of having quite a big team. And over the 8 years, and we had people researching images, like Mike did a bit, we had people in the regions. So I got to do Wellington just because I was quite familiar with a lot of the stuff in the archives there. But we had people in Waikato, Jackie Tuapiki, Te Rau Kupinga did the East Coast for us, Matariki Williams did the Bay of Plenty, and that was kind of because we were aware of the layers, that come through when you dig down in terms of text. So we wanted to do that with the images as well. And fiscally, I don't know how Bridget reconciles that, because it seems, I guess I see that in her tenacity. She could see that kaupapa and hopefully making some financial benefits out of this book aren't mutually exclusive. But I don't know how publishers work, but this process seems to be quite different to how anyone else would make a book. Yeah,
it's a legacy work, very much. And do you guys feel a bit of, maybe collective ownership's probably not the right word, but do you feel like it's a legacy for Māori, and do you feel like it's a legacy for New Zealand, and that it's really going to stand the test of time? And when we look back in decades to come, we can say that this has aged well. We can still relate to the book.
Oh, you're throwing to me? Okay. Well, I guess I'll be really interested. One of the measures here will be, how many units are they moving, right? What is the take-up of New Zealand? Is it going to be laying around in people's houses? Are people going to... I think that's the real thing, right? So some sort of question of saturation. Are schools going to work it into the curriculum or not? Because what it's been up to now, we're like, that's crap, and that's this, and that's... But you can't kind of spend your whole life just talking about the deficiencies of the existing stock, something new. And here it is. And so, there isn't... Before this book came out, I think some, schools and universities could legitimately say, we can't really do that because we don't have... Well, they can't say that now. And so it'd be really interesting if then there still isn't take up, then something else is going on. So I think that's something I'm interested in. But I think, if it's worked into school curriculums, if it's being argued over in smoker rooms and workplaces, then then it's a legacy. But that's in terms of product. Well, coming back to the thing about there was kind of this informal team and there's still this kind of a survivors club, right? I mean, kind of went to war, and it's like the RSA for Tangata Whenua.
I survived Tangata Whenua.
Yeah, exactly, and t-shirts. So, but I think that there is kind of that team there, lowercase t, for other projects and other things. And I sort of knew Arden even not really well, and we kind of got to know each other better through this. And so I think there is, that's one of the enduring positive consequences of this project. As a way that it did bring divergent people together, and there's
A new community.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in one sense, renewing old bonds and making new ones, and I think it was quite a broad church. I think that was one of the strengths. Like it wasn't a particular kind of person that was involved. I think it really was. It took all sorts, and it had all sorts.
How do you feel the book has been received among Māori, Leanne? Like anecdotally, I think there's been really good take up. Everyone's talking about it. Christmas time, about everyone in my whānau got a copy of Tangata Whenua.
Are we in the same family? Because that's what happened in our household.
Have you found a similar enthusiasm? And
it's hard for me to gauge because I do the same as you two. Oh, you need a present. Here you go. Like I gave a talk on Anzac Day, and I. Instead of taking the money for it, I said, here, go buy this book and, donate it to the kura kaupapa. So it's going to be, if you've got a birthday coming up, you're guaranteed what you're going to get for your
For
present.
like the next 10 years,
Yeah,
basically.
pretty much. But that's partly because I think it is one of those legacy things that, it'll sit on the coffee table, sure, but someone will pick it up. Just like I did Michael King's book at my uncle's house. But hopefully people won't have the same reactions to the images that I did. But I can't actually say because I haven't seen the stats, but I know when I was at the launch in Wellington and seeing all the copies in the bookshop, and they were saying, it's the kind of book that will sell over time. They won't be the kind that will go out the door in big numbers. It'll just be one of those slow burning books, and that will be testament also to the the arguments and the research that has gone into it as well. I think.
But it's very much a book by Māori for Māori, and I think it's really positive for Māori to see their own stories presented in a way they can relate to. But how do you think that works for non-Māori New Zealanders when they see these stories told by Māori in a way that they might not have ever encountered before? How do you think that will play with New Zealanders, or is playing with New Zealanders? Is it confronting, do you think, or are there more positive responses you might not be able to answer?
I don't know, but I mean, one thing I would say is that I think what this book shows is a kind of an affirmation of the historical method. This isn't like, this builds on earlier work. This doesn't throw the baby up the bathwater and start afresh. And so I think this is an affirmation of previous generations of scholarship in New Zealand.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something to reflect on and kind of be grateful for, certainly as an historian. But at the same time, I think it has done something new, and it is, as you say, having aroha there and sort of younger ones of us coming through. I mean, I think that is something that didn't happen, as recently as like 1980, the Oxford History of New Zealand. Like even Bill Oliver reflecting on that 5-10 years later, it's like, oh my God, that was so of its time, the way in which you have something mild early on chronologically, and then, you just sort of write that stuff out because... so the fact that there's a move away from that, there's something quite new, but at the same time, there is, Judith herself, is from a really established generation of scholarship, and this is an affirmation of her work. I think that's, it's important, but I think that should be comforting to historians and New Zealanders generally.
That's a good point about it being a triumph of the historical method. But Leanne, do you think sort of non-trained historians would be able to do this sort of work, or be able to write Tangata Whenua and research it? Do you think you need that formal training? Or
well, I'm not a historian, so yes.
We're very special.
But in saying that, I've had, it's not that I wasn't trained, I just wasn't, I'm not from the history discipline, but, some of them are my best friends. So absolutely, because I think, we were talking before about just, and it's just something that I've come to myself. As Māori, I think we are ad hoc historians anyway, and so we do this. And so for me, it's sometimes maybe thinking about the way we produce history differently, and not being, as much as absolutely you need academic rigour, but perhaps finding ways to collaborate where, and we do this anyway within academic pursuits, where the integration of oral histories, it's just another, trying to find ways to collaborate in a more encompassing way. So, yeah, I guess that's how I would, yes, the answer is yes, I do think.
Sort of related point I was going to make was, I think it's very clever the way in which the book speaks to, like, it's accessible, right? It's, like the kind of the objective, fictitious, man in the street can pick it up and read it, and it's accessible. But at the same time, I can see myself using, parts of this in, third or even third year classes or honours classes when we're teaching. So the way it doesn't fall between categories, which is also the danger of trying to speak to multiple audiences. Like, it actually hits a whole lot of targets. It's very clever, and that's by no accident. That must have been incredibly difficult to do. But this isn't, a textbook for people in ivory towers. Nor is it like a dumbed down thing. I think that's quite incredible how it can actually, speak to people in quite different places, quite different levels of education, and all that stuff. I mean, that's, it's kind of what you've got to do to sell it, and it's to pay the bills and all that. But I think there's also there's some kind of moral crusade there, right? But that's a moral position to take to try and do that, and incredible to actually achieve it.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but I think that's part of what Bridget Williams does is, it's what I would call kaupapa. She's very, knows what she wants to do, and I think she's trying to push us, going back to your earlier question about, how will Pākehā Whenua, I'm not sure, but I think Bridget taking on this, putting it out there, she wants to contribute to the discourse, and I don't think Pākehā is scared to engage with a narrative that's driven from a Māori perspective. I think we're ready for it. Judge Joe at the launch in Wellington talked about the book, being a bridge, and I absolutely agree with that. And engaging with it is easy. And I think, if we can move ourselves, if this can be a means to promulgate ourselves past, this box of seeing ourselves from a European paradigm, and getting into the many layers and narratives of New Zealand, then awesome. That's part of the legacy of this book. And I'm not just talking about Māori Pākehā and Māori Pākehā and everybody else. I'm talking about iwi, hapu whānau narratives too that can tell, add to the layers of the Tangata Whenua story.
I think that's a very good point to open it up if anyone wants to ask any questions.
I have a question. I know this is illustrated history. I'm interested in the influence that oral history had on the book and how that is translated into like text or image or kind of made valid, because it feels like oral history is not, text and image are primary, right, when it comes to research.
I think we should throw to the Dr. Historian.
Oh, crap, that's me. Well, one thing I would say that despite her, premature passing, Judith, effectively a third of the book is still hers, and she was someone who took oral history seriously. And so that, that her work is one of the anchors of oral history, and that we know the fruits of oral history is found in her work. Atholl, he's a prehistorian, so he's dealing with bones and rocks. Those things don't talk. As a rule. Just I guess my own little contribution. Like mutton birder who's grown up, grown up in a family who's gone birding, and now I'm going through the archives relating to it. So it's not an oral history thing, but I'm forever finding stuff in the archive, which I guess I would say I can read in a way that non-birders couldn't. Stuff like, oh, they're having them on, oh, they're playing that joke, or there's those, and when there's any doubt, I just ring up grandfather. Oh, old Tom Spence. I remember him saying that. Yeah, so there's this. I don't know what I'm going to do when grandfather dies. It's this kind of, as my, I guess if I do oral history, it's this way I sort of run stuff past him. That's something of an answer. I guess I guess my reading of the archive is informed by connections, to the communities I kind of, research, that I've come from within. But I dabbled in oral history, basically it's just really hard, right? It's really hard. The results are highly uneven, and I don't know. I think I'm increasingly less sociable, and so I'm becoming weirder by the day, and I just like to spend time in the Hocken where it's quiet and books just, it's all on my terms. But who knows? Maybe there is that sense in which oral history was something that, happened with Rogernomics and fusion cooking in the 80s, and it's, we kind of look back at it with mixed feelings. But ultimately, it's just really hard to do. Right? Hats off to people who do it well. Monty's a great example, right? You should talk about this with your Māori battalion stuff. That's a lot of that is oral history stuff, and it's rich.
My day job is I work on the Māori Battalion website, and I've had the luck and fortune to spend to be managed by Dr. Montessuta, who wrote the tome Ngā Tamatoa, and a lot of that has oral history in it. And if we think about, war, when the interviews were done, which generally 50, 60 years after the war, memory, my memory of what happened yesterday is pretty shoddy, let alone, 30 years ago. So there are just general issues with including that. But I think in that book, he does it in a way where, he has all the historical fact. And I don't think historical documentation is necessarily unbiased. Because, we write memos and then we're like, oh no, you better not put that in. So it's not like it's objective. So I guess it's just making sure, is it making sure? Like Mike said, it's hard. But for me, the importance of oral history is not only that we have it recorded for posterity, but I find on the website, people aren't necessarily interested in what their grandfather or great-grandfather is saying about the war. They're just happy that he's saying something. So it's the record. And I guess, like this talk that we're having today, we can't say how people are going to interpret it in 50 years. And just as with those interviews, you can't always, you don't have power over it sometimes. So oral history, I'm not the person to talk about it, but I do appreciate it and the value that it brings to the work that I do and the understanding that I get about the Māori Battalion.
All joking aside as well, I think it's one reason why I've steered away from oral history in the last 5-10 years is the fact there's so much archival and kind of documentary evidence on colonial New Zealand that hasn't been touched. Like there's this assumption that, we kind of know all the record stuff, we need to go and get, the real oil from this other stuff.
That's my question, especially when you're dealing with some First People stuff. Is the written word or a photo more true? And is that a real, colonial paradigm there? If you see something written down as a colonial diary, is that more true than hearing? No,
of course. It's an archive. It's an artifact of colonialism itself, right? And so you read it as such. There's books written on this, right? Reading the archive, the limits of the archive. But what would we do without it? That would be. I think the point is, despite those kind of hang-ups and pitfalls, there's still so much incredibly rich information to be had there, and I'm continually surprised. And actually, a lot of kind of colonial era journalists in New Zealand lived close to Māori communities, had cultural capacity way beyond journalists in New Zealand the last 50 years, even those in the last, since biculturalism's been the thing. And so you actually find a lot of, really, deep, nuanced, beautifully written things about Māori by Pākehā in things from the 1890s. Like, amazingly so. And I'm still, maybe when that well runs dry, I'll resort back to oral history, I don't know. But at the moment, I'm having a lot of fun playing in, 19th century written records, basically. That's a good question, though. It's a timely question, I think.
How much oral history do you think made it into the book? Was there a great reliance on it? Because I know Judith Binney was, although she relied heavily on oral material with a lot of her stuff, like her investigations into the Ringatu, none of that was recorded. She kept that in her own head and wouldn't put that in any book. But did a lot of sort of the more culturally safe oral material make it into the book?
I think it's a bit, because I'm speaking for the authors here, but I think it's a bit like what Mike said. It might inform, what you've written as opposed to sitting there as a quote. And just from my limited experience with oral history, it's incredibly time-consuming as well. So there's a lot of work goes into, the interviews, the prep, the transcription alone is, and it's so I can't actually answer that definitively.
I think you touched on a really good point, though, that when Melissa Williams is writing something about post-World War II Māori organisation and what it is to grow up in, Māori enclave in Auckland in the 1960s and 70s, she doesn't need oral history because she was there. And so she, I guess she's doing a little bit like what I was talking about. She's using these documentary sources to write about something that she's lived through, that she knows about. And so I think there's another space that's, the way in which people who live history write it. It has something of oral history in it. Whether or not it would actually qualify, I don't know.
Some kind of experiential
that's
history.
Right. I think that it shapes the way you approach all sorts of evidence, written or otherwise.
I'm just curious, just to change the subject slightly. Sounds like there's a lot of contributors and it's taken quite a long time to put it together. Did you have to come together very often in person? Because everything's on the internet now, and you're from Wellington, you're from Otago. How often did people come together to get certain parts of it over the line? Or
Is this like the third time we've met in real life?
Yeah, other than maybe at Hui.
At the launch?
Yeah.
That
I
probably
wasn't at the
Oh,
launch.
you went at the launch. That's a good night. I don't remember who.
I was in Gisborne, we've probably met not at all on the
NZHA
project.
conference? NZHA.
We've met maybe like Pauhere Kōrero or Māori History in Hui, but not with this. A couple of the researchers I have never met, but I spoke to them over email. Still have not met them to this day. So Jackie Tuapiki, I don't even know what he looks like, but he did our Waikato research. But the core team absolutely would meet quite often. Bridget's very communicative, so she was always, it was a bit of both. And when we were doing the spreads, the layouts, last year actually, we had all the images strewn out over on the floor of a church in Wellington. So, over the 8 years, we definitely have met over time different people. Bridget would have been the core person, and she would, if she needed to, meet with people. So, I think I was, over the years, probably involved at least twice a year at a hui, at a meeting with the big team. So, everybody, generally the authors, and I was lucky in that some reason Bridget thought I could have oversight over the images, so I was always kind of part of the team in either in a quite a full-on way or just on the periphery, but always kind of weaving in and out of it. So we did meet often, I would think, for a book endeavour, but I think you probably would have to for something like this.
So coming to the thing, so it was basically Bridget. I was, halfway through teaching my first course, a mate today was like, Bridget Williams and Tom Rennie. They're coming to see you. They're coming here. They want to talk to you. And it's like, okay, I've got to sure, right, make it quick. Bridget Williams. And so they came and said, we want to do this thing, but I was like, oh, okay. And that was it for a year, or, you know, so there was, you know, and I never went to Wellington to wander through the church and look at the images, and I probably would have declined the offer had the invite been, you know, and so there was a lot of that. A lot of it was done online. And so you mentioned Joe Scully before, who is, you know, a complete legend in this project. And so we had these email, you know, these clusters of emails at different times, right, just backs and forwards, and it was at the launch in Auckland. I was, you know, I'd probably been there for 3 hours, and I was leaving in about 10 minutes. And here's your free book. Okay. Oh, so you're Michael? Yeah. Oh, I'm Joe Scully. Oh, Joe. You know, it's just like this. You know, it was like a pen pal. You know, 40 years later, it was like, oh. You know, it's like. So you do. It's a bizarre experience. You have this really intimate. You know, the emails to each other at 1 a.m. and you walk right past them in the street. Which I guess is something, the sign of the times, right? But it's but also like you say, the number of people who were doing lots of little things on the project.
Yeah. And that's just the actual team. There are like librarians and especially, you know, especially near the end of the book, who were taking, you know, orders for last minute images. And there's people in the institutions who are, you know, really got behind it as well. And that's from all the relationship building that Bridget did, that Aroha and Atholl and all the, and Joe especially has with those institutions. So we you know, we're really supported in just different ways.
I do remember right at that end stage, there was, so on the piece I wrote, there was basically this, you know, double page spread. So on the left-hand page, there were photos from the Hocken Library taken on a TDI, of basically of the Bragg family, from about 1910 on a little island called TR, just off Port Adventure in Stewart Island. And, anyway, there was some of these photos have been digitised and put online on the Hocken website, and they said, oh, we want these 3 or 4, whatever it was, and they showed me the press, said, no, put them in this order. No, that's fine, no questions asked, so that's fine. So I said why, but and then they had the you know, the citation or whatever, the record number, and it just didn't look right to me. There was 2 different numbers for each different image, and something wasn't right, and I knew there was one of this guy's descendants worked at university, and I said, oh, Corey, his name's spelled this way, isn't it? Yeah, okay, blah, blah, blah. And we're checking, do you know who that is? No, okay. And he was saying, oh, see that image there? Neville Pete used it in a book, but it was much crisper than, because the family's all got this image in their lounge sort of thing. It's much crisper than what we could reproduce, and I mucked around with it, and whatever scanner, I couldn't do it. You know, do you reckon they have another version of it? And I said, oh, I don't know, because these photos were published in the Otago Witness, they're kind of a photo expose. And so I went down there and I discovered that, like, this was like right before, it was like one day till then, like the press had to be, that was it. And I was like, no, I'm on, you know, it was like 5 to 5, whatever, and the Hocken staff when I go home was like, just stop. And so what I found, there were 3 layers of images. There was the original photos that were taken, which were in a photo album, and so Neville had a scan off that. That's why his was crisper than reproductions taken off the newspaper. There was the newspaper ones, which you can imagine were only about a third of what was in the photo album. But then there were also the negatives. And not all of the photos, not all the negatives have been developed in the first place. Something like that. There was three different layers of things. And so in the end, I got the right citations, the best, you know, quality version of all those things. And it was just off a hunch that something wasn't right. But then also I said to Corey, oh, is it this photo album? There's like all these other photos there, because they're of like the old man and the wife, or maybe 3 or 4 of them gutting birds. There was these photos of, must have been when they'd done those stage shots. It was like the snotty-nosed kids running around on the firewood heap, and there's just gone click, and there's like 6 or 8 little kids, you know, adorable children, and, you know, what are they wearing and what are they doing? And, you know, they were hands around each other and laughing, and Corey's like, oh, I've never seen them, one of them will be my great-grandmother, or, you know, it was that kind of, and so, of course, the next day he bunked work and straight down to the Hocken to, oh, right, you know, never seen and never heard, so it was like another round, like the family thought they knew all these photos already, there was another, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them no one had ever seen, so it was, you know, it wouldn't have happened but for this project.
Can I see someone's?
When you're kia ora, Leanne, when you're putting together a written history, I mean, there are landmark events that have to be written about. You don't really have a choice. When you're putting together a visual history, is there an element of that as well? Because there are iconic images that cover this territory, and how do you balance, you know, acknowledging that from an historiographical context, I guess. I mean, these are with including new material for the purposes of having a point of difference for people to buy this book and not the works of Arns Westra or...
Yeah. Well,
That's a very good question.
yeah, that is a great question. I probably can't address the historiographical stuff, but I'm thinking of the art that we've included, and I remember I was lucky enough to do the research and have a conversation with Jonathan Manefioke, because we knew, it's so huge. What's Māori art for, that's one question to ask, and what do we put in this book? And Jonathan gave such great advice that I probably stuck to too voraciously. He said, rather than the aesthetic, go for the political meanings. And so I really stuck to that. But then Neil Partington, who's an artist and designer, he designed the book, he didn't agree with that. So, there's those kind of things coming in there. I guess that's one example with the book that comes to mind. Did you want to say something, Mike? Did you?
Oh, no, that's a very good question. Because that's the thing, you think of the 1970s, you think of Bastion Point, right? You think of this big ring of cops standing around with a couple of ramshackle tin sheds. So there are those images.
The hikoi.
Yeah, could you tell
Whenua.
this history without including those images? But on the same hand, you're trying to be novel and shed light on hidden corners, and that's someone had to intentionally make those choices.
Yeah, I think we did
It
too.
wasn't me.
No. There were a lot of, like I said, both robust discussions about. On the other, I definitely know one because in the 20th century, of course, we have to have things like the All Blacks, Buck Shelford, rugby.
Atholl was like, less rugby. Atholl was like, more rugby.
Yeah, so Atholl was always putting he was. We need to have Buck in there. Why? I'm like, I think
Got his testicles torn apart.
so what? I think
Yeah,
we should have
that's
Rico gear. What
right.
do I know about rugby? So just things, like that, personal preferences, and then historical. I can't remember. Did Buck make it in?
He's on the cover.
Probably. Oh, there we go.
But
But,
you
yeah,
knew that.
I still advocated for Rico gear. Yeah. So yeah, stuff. I guess decisions were made, but I don't think we got the iconic whenua, even the iconic Māori battalion image. We were trying to really show what was out there, if we could.
Because I remember when Bridget first came to me and said, right, we want you to, I went to the Riverton Museum, the Bluff Maritime Museum, these obscure little parts. And the Bluff Maritime Museum was like, right, climb above the smoker room, pull out the 4 cardboard boxes, and, that's the archive. And, and actually found some great images. And one of them has led on to a huge, big research project for me. I would never have looked for it. I would never have found it, but it's a real one of these spin-off projects you talked about. Where was I going with this? What was the question?
Where was it? Where did that spin-off project lead you?
Oh, no, well, we'll hold that. We're talking about, okay, so so Bridget was saying, we at that point, we're expecting to find about 2,000 images, and then about a year later, it's like, we think we might get 5,000, and then it was like, we've got 6,000 images, we can still only print 520 or whatever the magic number, and then it was like 12,000.
12,000.
So, that's the point, some hard decisions would have had to be made. Incredibly difficult, and that's one of the potential. A potential spin-off project is what does one do with, you essentially now have a database, right, an index. You don't have permission to reproduce all of them, but you know that they exist. There's some kind of archive of images that's now there. What do we do with that knowledge, right? What do we do with those things?
Or do we highlight the small image from Riverton Museum that shows a localised experience of a larger event, or do we show the one that everyone expects? So I guess those are I would go for the one that no one's seen as opposed to the one that's everywhere on the internet. But, it's those decisions that the authors make, I would expect, yeah.
How do you create a narrative out of the images? Because I think that's what the book does. It doesn't just rely on text, but page by page you get a full story by those images. How did you sort of go about connecting everything?
I think I remember having a small discussion one time with Aroha about that because, you know, like I said, I read books and I'd rather look at the images. It's just, that's how I see it. And I think we were really aware of Monty Suta's work and how you could actually read through Ngā Tamatoa and still get quite an informative, you could still be well informed about the history of, you know, what that book was trying to tell. So I guess it's just having robust academic discussion and thinking about the broader themes and what we wanted to, what the book, what they want the book to say. Yeah, I think it was just really having an engaged team in knowing, being really directed by the authors, as well as Bridget having, you know, her oversight over the book. Yeah, I don't know. It was a collaborative effort. I don't know that it was anything, any one person's perspective coming in, but definitely, you know, you have people like Aroha, Atholl, and Bridget keeping tabs on it, and we'd all have our little says. Yeah, I'm not sure if that really answered the question.
No, it does. That's perfect. And I think if there are no more questions, we should probably do the draw.
Woohoo!